Absolutely. Yep. That's exactly how it is. And so, yeah, you have to present more evidence to show that there's a need for it to be a no knock. We didn't even attempt to. We weren't trying for that. I mean, this is it's a marijuana grow. We weren't necessarily worried about him being able to destroy evidence. It's not like he's going to be able to go and flush the grow. So so we got it. We had been to the house many times, so
But that's the point I want to ask you. That you guys have been to the house 5 times. Either this guy didn't get the message, or he's stupid. Because if the cops had been to my house 5 times, I got to figure at some point you're coming back with a warrant.
Mhm.
Either he's too, I'm thinking like, let me get rid of this stuff. But apparently he didn't.
yeah, I mean, he obviously had a completely different mindset. He knew we were coming back. I mean, and ultimately that comes out as the story unfolds. And rather than get rid of it, he just prepared for us in a different way. So we had gone there enough. We knew the layout of the house the best we could. We had done all of our scouts, and then anytime we would serve a warrant, we would do a risk assessment, and we had a matrix that we would use to fill in information, and it would be essentially it's like a scorecard. You put the known information that you have, and there's points that are assigned to certain things. And that scorecard will tell you who serves the search warrant. In our particular case, the matrix, is 0 to say 30. Um, Certain things would score points on the matrix if he's known to be violent, if he's this or known to to use a gun. Simply having a gun doesn't raise the matrix at all, because again, out in the West out here, everybody has firearms. So we did the matrix. If the score came back at a 20 to a 25, that meant we had to consult with the SWAT team and just basically have them buy off on our plan on how we were going to serve the search warrant. If the score was 25 or above, then that meant the SWAT team itself had to serve the search warrant. Anything other than that, my unit would serve the warrant. And we would average anywhere between 130 to 150 search warrants a year is what we were doing back at the time. So we did a lot of search warrants, a lot of entries, trained for it. And when we did the matrix on it, the minimum for a narcotics warrant was a 10. Like if it was a narcotics warrant, that was 10 points. And then if it was a no-knock warrant, that was 0 points. But if it was a knock and announce warrant, just because sometimes it can be a little more dangerous announcing your president, that gave you a 1 point. And that's what it came out as, was an 11, which is about the lowest score that you can get in terms of looking over the risk assessment and what we of known dangers. So obviously we were going to serve this warrant ourselves. Our unit was. And we had so we had our briefing. We went over the plan. Everybody knew their assignments. The plan is that we would use that carport door, and that's where we would make contact. We'd go up to the house, we'd knock and make contact, hopefully get the homeowner to answer the door. Once the homeowner answered the door and we went into the home, we would clear the home, but we would do it in a way that we call slowly and deliberately, meaning we're not just running through the home. We're slowly doing it. You're slicing the corners, calling out, announcing your presence, making it known that the police are here serving a warrant. Guys, we decided to split the team in half. With that carport door, I talked earlier about how there was a landing there, and there's steps leading to go upstairs, and then there's a whole bunch of steps leading to the basement. And we could split the team in half, use that door, half the team securing the upstairs, while simultaneously the other half of the team is securing the basement. So that was kind of the plan.
Just to clarify one point in your search warrant, so it's not going to announce if nobody responds, you have the authority to breach the door, though, right?
Yes, we do. The way that the law reads is that you need to give a reasonable amount of time, and that's essentially how vague it can be. So typically, 30 seconds to a minute is generally the standard. I mean, it obviously depends on the size of the house. This particular house is very small. It's probably 900 square feet upstairs and 900 square feet basement. So just a really small home. So that was the plan. After briefing, everybody went and geared up, put on all their stuff, their vests, things like that, identifying them as police, raid jackets, police, hats, police. Now the interesting thing here, and I'll tell you the story, the good and the bad, the lessons that were bad on me and that I've learned. I went back to my locker and I grabbed my vest and my bullet proof vest is what everyone would know it as. And I went
More commonly known as a bullet-resistant vest, because as we're finding out with a lot of the firepower that's out there, a lot of times, unless you've got the ceramic plate or the level 4.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I went to put mine on, and as I was strapping it, the way that they fit over you is with Velcro straps. You strap them, and then the Velcro sits to the front of your chest. And as I pulled mine on, the Velcro on mine on the right side ripped off. I had used it so many times that it finally just broke. And I actually remember thinking, this is just a stupid little marijuana grow. It's not a big deal. These aren't that dangerous. And I put my vest in my locker and put my jacket on that said police, and just thought, you know what, I won't need it for this small of a thing. And didn't wear it that particular day, which, comes into play here later. Everybody is assigned their role, and then the plan is a lot of times we would do our search warrants. We had a raid van where everybody on the team would get in one van and drive up. But on this particular warrant, where we were anticipating having to take down this grow, we decided to take a whole bunch of different vehicles, anticipating a ton of evidence. Once we got the search warrant, the plan had kind of changed, where we were going up to the house before and we're to just probably had plucked his plants and taken them. Now, because we have a search warrant and everything involved, we're going to have to go through the whole process of cataloging all of the evidence and dismantling the entire grow. We still weren't planning on taking him to jail. It still wasn't worth that type of resource, but certainly, we're had to take a different route now that we had a search warrant involved. So we all drove two to a car, two persons to a car up to the area.
How many are on the team now? How many folks are you sending to do this search warrant?
9. And Steve Zaccardi on light duty obviously can't participate on the warrants, but he wanted to help. So he was like, I'll come and help as well. So he was coming as well, but he wasn't part of the entry. He's like, I'll just wait across the street at the church, and once the home's secure, I'll come in and be like the evidence scribe and help package evidence and things of that nature. So the plan is we'd all leave the office, and like I say, there was a church across the street. The plan is we would all park in the back of the church, meet up there, and then walk over towards the suspect's home. And that's what we did. By the time we met at the church was about 8:20 in the evening. And as we moved over to the house was closer to, 8:30, 8:35, that time frame.
Now, did you have any tools with you for entry, or are you guys just going to kick the door? Or do you have some breaching tools?
We have some breaching tools. We have we have one tool that's called the hooligan. It's this long metal.
It's a fire department tool. You guys wanted to be firefighters.
We're using it for the right way, to get in dope houses.
There you go. That's what you need it for.
Yeah, it's like essentially a crowbar that you can use to pop screen doors. And then the other thing that we had is called a ram. It's just this great big, heavy cylinder with handles that you can hit a door, you aim for the doorknob and you can pop a door open if you have to force entry. And now the funny thing about that is as we were leaving the office, I'm coming out of my office about the same time Jared Francom is coming out of his office. Now, the thing about Jared was a huge dude. I mean, a big bodybuilder. I mean, the guy lived in the gym and it showed. I mean, just a massive guy. He was one of those guys that always carried around a gallon of water. He was always drinking water, and just this really into fitness. And as we're leaving the office, him and I are heading out of the office, and he was assigned as the ram in the event that we needed to force entry. He would be the one with the ram. And as we're leaving, he turns to me and he's like, "Hey, Sarge, if I end up having to use the ram, I'll put a clinic on for you. I'll show you how to properly ram a door." And, he just like cops do, talking shit to each other. And I'm like, "Oh, really, Jared? Are you? You're gonna put a ram clinic on? You're gonna teach us all how to properly use it?" And he's like, "Yep, I sure am." And so we kind of laughed at that and went our way. So we get up to the church. Again, everybody's dressed as police officers, making it well known who we are. We make our way to the house. We're kind of in a we call it a stick. It's a single file line. Everybody has their assignments and they're in a specific order, depending on how they're going to make entry into the home. We go to the carport, and I peel off and I stand on the front lawn. And as we were approaching the home, there was a faint light on in what turned out to be the kitchen. It was that right bay window just to the right of the front door. That light was on, and I was on the front lawn because as we started to knock and make contact, I was anticipating if someone came to the front door versus that carport door, that then I would make contact with them and let them know who we were. It was the police and so on. As we get to the carport, Jason Vanderwerf, who's the case agent, he goes to that carport door and he starts banging on the door. Those loud police type knocks. Boom, boom, boom. Police, we have a search warrant. Come to the door. Boom, boom, boom. Police, we have a search warrant. Come to the door. He's the only one talking. Everyone else is quiet, and he's loud. And again, me being over around the corner on the front of the lawn watching, I can hear it plain as day. And I'm watching to see if I can see any movement. And I don't see anything happening at all. And I can't tell you exactly how long we were there for, probably a minute to a minute and a half, which doesn't sound like a lot of time.
Oh, brother, but it's a lifetime when you're waiting for somebody
Yes,
to come to the door.
exactly. Long enough that I started to get a little nervous. Not that I knew anything was about to happen, not like any type of sixth sense premonition. Just I'm looking at this house and it's a small little house, and I'm thinking, anywhere in the house that someone's at, they should have been able to come to the door by now. And somebody in the team obviously was thinking that as well, because I heard someone say, "Hey, it's been long enough. Let's breach the door." It had a screen door, but the screen door wasn't locked, so we didn't need to use the hoolie. So they opened that, and then Jared moves up with the ram. I mean, that was kind of his signal to move up with the ram. And all of a sudden, you just hear boom as Jared rams the door with the ram. As soon as he hits the door, everyone on the team starts calling out, "Police, search warrant, police, search warrant." So that anyone in the house can hear us. They know it's the police. They know what's going on. Now, the funny thing is, this is an old home. It was probably built in the 50s, and the door was flimsy. And when you're hitting a door, like the better doors to hit, it's a good solid door because you get that mass and it hits it and pops it open. But with this flimsy door, it kind of buckled it. So Jared hits it and it doesn't pop open. So he has to hit it again, and he ends up hitting it 5 times before he's able to kind of knock it open. And he put kind of a hole in it and kind of knocked it down. Whole time everyone's screaming, "Police, search warrant." Once the doors open, the team starts to move in. The guys that are assigned to go upstairs start filtering into the upstairs, and the guys that are assigned as the downstairs entry team go down and are starting to clear it. And I'm coming around the corner. Nobody had came to the front door. I didn't see any movement. And as I'm coming around the corner, Jared's standing there. About that same time, he's starting to set the ram down on the sidewalk. And he looks at me, and cops are always busting each other's balls. I mean, that's just the culture. And he knows it's coming. Like, he knows it's coming. I remember he had this little like sheepish grin on his face. And I look at him and I'm like, I say to him, "Hey, what's up with all these muscles, dude? Like, they must be for looks only, because they sure as hell don't work. Because how many times did you have to hit the door? I thought you were going to put this clinic on how to ram a door. And he looks right at me and he says, "Fuck you, Sarge." And we have this moment where we laugh, and he goes into the house and then I go into the house. I'm assigned as part of the downstairs team. So I immediately head down the stairs. I can hear everybody in the house calling out police search warrant. As I get to the bottom of the stairs, the basement is really just an unfinished basement except for that grow room that I had talked about. So by the time I get to the bottom of the stairs, I can hear the guys that are assigned to the downstairs are calling out. They're saying, basement secure, clear, basement's clear. Meaning that they've already secured the basement. And they're able to do that so quickly because it was just an unfinished square. And as they come in and dig their corners and hit that area, there's just no one down there. And someone had even opened the door to the grow room and had gone in there, and the grow room was clear. So I turn and step into the grow room. And that room that we had suspected was a marijuana grow room was, in fact, the marijuana grow room. So as I'm down there, and as I talk about this and kind of tell you, I'll tell you exactly what was happening, like each thought, and it'll take me a minute or two to explain the thought. But the reality is everything's happening in a fraction of a second. So I'm down there. I go into the grow room. I'm looking at the grow. And I'm kind of deciding, I remember looking at it and trying to decide how we were going to go about dismantling it and getting in there and getting it all done as quick as we could and move on to the other case that we were going to work that night with our informant that we knew to be a bigger case.
How many plants were in there?
I think total ended up being 18. So just like, again, very, 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 very small scale. Like, this is not a big thing at all. As I'm looking at it, I can hear the guys upstairs calling out, police search warrant, as they're slowly moving through the home, which is kind of a double-edged sword, because that also you're announcing who you are and where you're at, but it's also, if someone's in there with ill intentions, you're sitting ducks and they know exactly where you're at, which is what happened in this case. So while I'm looking at the plants, what's happening upstairs, the guys are moving through the upstairs. They're clearing it. They go through the kitchen. There's a living room. They had cleared that. There's this little half hallway. It's probably about maybe 3 feet long, 2 feet wide, and it has a wall to the left that's like 4 feet tall. It's just this little half wall. And on the other side of it is the living room. And I mean, if you can think of this house as just a square, it was just a square. So you're in the bottom half of the square, and you're starting to move into the top half of the square. You got this little hallway that leads into a second hallway. And that second hallway had a bedroom at each end of it and a bathroom. And what we would do is we would train. You never would go anywhere by yourself while you're clearing a home. We were fortunate. We had a training facility in Weber County that was really world renowned. It was called the Swanson Tactical Training Center. It's this huge training center. I mean, they had a city in there. They had school and saloon and convenience stores, hotels, and you could do a lot of training in there.
Well, you had Murphy's ears when you said saloon, like drinking and belly up to the bar.
Yeah. Well, when we get through this shootout and stuff, I'll tell you a saloon story. But so everything was in there. So we trained, and so with as many warrants as we were doing, everybody knew how to move together. I mean, we were good at that type of stuff. So it was one of the guys named Sean Grogan. He's in that little half hallway, which leads into the bigger hallway. And because it's an intersection, like a T intersection where he's going into an unknown area, he stops and he says, "Support." What that means is for someone else, he's not going to move any further into the home until someone else on the team comes up, taps him on the shoulder, lets him know, "Hey, you're not alone," and then they will turn and move into that new section of the home. So that's what's happening. Grogan calls support. Derek Draper taps him on the shoulder, and they turn and start moving down the hallway. And as they're moving down the hallway, they're still calling out police, identifying themselves that they're serving a search warrant. Grogan says that the end of the hallway was the bedroom, and the bedroom door was mostly closed. It was maybe open about 10 inches. The home was dark. The light in the kitchen was on, which was backlighting us, but this portion of the home was dark. And again, this is happening upstairs. I'm not part of it. I'm downstairs looking at the grow. But what happens is Grogan's moving his way down to that last bedroom. And as he goes to push the door open, all of a sudden a hand comes around the corner. Not the person or anything, just a hand. And it point blank is holding a 9mm Beretta. And it is right in Grogan's face. I mean, you're talking 2 inches at the most. It's just point blank in his face. Obviously, what had happened is the suspect was in the house and was waiting and was hearing them and knew when they were coming. So as he starts to open that door, he was just waiting around the corner and sticks the gun right in his face and pulls the trigger. Now, the thing that saves Grogan's life is he flinches a little bit, slightly turns his head. So as that shot goes off, it goes through kind of at an angle and shatters his jaw and goes through his jaw. But rather than take it dead on in the face, which would have, clipped his brainstem and killed him, just that slight little flinch saves him. So he's shot through the face. He falls into a little bathroom that was right there. I mean, just a tiny little bathroom. And Derek Draper's right behind him. Derek Draper sees the gun come around the corner, and what he does is falls backwards and lands on his back, and a couple of shots go right over the top of his head. And then Grogan, I mean, this is absolutely amazing story. I mean, on his part, and the guy shot through the head. He easily could have just, I mean, I think most people would have just laid there and died. That's not who Grogan is. He's not going to just go without a fight. He can't see the suspect, and he's in the bathroom, but he has an idea of where he believes the suspect is. So he starts shooting through the wall at the suspect where he believes the suspect is. And Draper does the same thing. He lands on his back. Luckily, the shots missed him, but he knows that the suspect was right around that corner when he stuck the gun around the corner. So he starts shooting as well. But it's an old home, and there was the framing for the bathroom door and the bedroom door, and all that wood essentially stopped it. And so the suspect wasn't hit. I'm downstairs, and I hear boom, boom, boom. That's it. Like 3, maybe 4 shots. The reality is at that time there was probably, I think it was 23 shots that were fired. 3 by the suspect, 15 by Grogan, and a few more by Derek Draper. But I didn't hear all that. I just heard 3, 4 shots, and then it was dead silent. And the first thing that I thought, I wanted to hear somebody call out dog. And the reason why is because, like I say, we served a lot of search warrants. And sometimes you'll get in a house where either it's they intentionally train the dog to like protect the home, the drugs or whatever. And so they attack you, or the dog's just protecting the home. But sometimes we've had dogs attack us. And if it gets bad enough, we've had to shoot dogs before. And so when I was hoping to hear that term dog, it was because I was hoping that that's what had happened, was that there was an aggressive dog, and that those couple of shots were just putting the dog down. I didn't hear that. It was real faint at this point. I couldn't tell exactly, but I heard something real mumbled, something out, like get out, something out. So again, being in the basement, you have no idea what's going on upstairs, even you just don't have the big picture. Your mind fills in the blanks. And so I figured that since it wasn't a dog, that there was a suspect, and that maybe he had taken a couple of shots at my guys and then was trying to escape out of the house. So I assumed that he might be going out of the back. So I come running up the stairs through the carport and turn, and I post up in the backyard. And I'm expecting to see someone maybe bailing out of a window, and I'm going to confront him in the backyard. And from this point right here, it's dead silent. I don't hear any more screaming. There's no more gunshots at all. And I sit in the backyard, not very long, just a moment or two. Well, while I was doing that, Draper was yelling at everyone, get out of the house, out, get out. And they were all filtering out behind me. And we're starting to set up a perimeter, had called, and were requesting backup and doing all the things that they were supposed to be doing. But because it's the nature of these things and the way they unfold so fast and everything, you don't see and understand just because you're there doesn't mean you know exactly the whole thing that's happening. So I don't see anyone in the backyard. I turn. I know that the shooting's upstairs. So now I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I start to come in. I go through the carport and I start to take a step back into the house with my intent was to go back to upstairs and figure out what's going on. And as I do that, Grogan comes running through the kitchen. I'm not even in the house yet. I'm just stepping through the doorway, and he's holding his face with both of his hands. And it's obvious that he's been shot through the face. Now, the crazy thing again about Grogan is the way that he was able to assess his situation. He was in that bathroom, shot in the face, and he looks around and he sees a bathroom window and he realizes that window's too small. I'm not going to be able to escape out of it. So I'm literally trapped in here. And he wasn't just going to lay there and died. He had shot back, and now there's a lull, and he had enough presence of mind to jump up and rush through the home because he wasn't just going to lay there and be a victim. So as he's coming through the kitchen, he crashes up against a wall. He's bleeding all over, head wounds obviously bleed a lot. He can't talk to me. So I grab him. Well, there's no more shooting going on. So at that particular time, my focus is on my guy. I knew his fiance at the time. They're married now, knew his kids. And I'm assuming that, okay, him and the bad guy had a shootout. Grogan got hit, but he must have killed the bad guy. Just your mind fills in the blanks when you don't know. So I grab him. He's able to walk. I'm helping to walk him and kind of help get him outside, get him down to the end of the driveway. And Steve Zaccardi, the sergeant that was on light duty, had been waiting across the street. He comes running up and he's like, "What's going on?" And I don't know. I think that they must have shot him. We have this quick conversation, basically that I think that the suspect's in the house dead. We can't wait for an ambulance. I say, "You get Grogan to the hospital, just load him in one of our cars and get him to the hospital. And I'll stay here and deal with the officer involved shooting that I'm assuming had just happened." So he grabs Grogan and starts to turn, takes him, he's walking him across the street. I turn and I take a step or two up the driveway. And all of a sudden I just hear boom, 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 more gunshots coming from within the house. And at this point it's continuous. It doesn't stop. So my mind shifts again. I realize, okay, it's not a dead suspect in the home. It's still an active shooting and the suspect's still in there. So I go rushing up the driveway. I know that it's upstairs. I come through the carport and I start up the stairs. And, the cool thing about training and when you train the right way and different things is it kicks in the times when you need it to kick in. And as I'm starting up these 4 steps to get to the upstairs, just naturally, without even thinking it, I just stop and I realize I can't just charge into the house around the corner into the unknown. Who knows where the bullets are flying. So I start to do a technique. You guys are familiar with it, but called slice the pie, where essentially you're peeking around the corner, slowly, so that you can figure out what's going on before you enter the room. And as I'm doing that, what I see Jared Francom and Casey Burrell, another guy on our team, standing over in that half little hallway that leads into the other hallway where Grogan had been shot. But they're standing in that half hallway. And I didn't see Jared exchanging shots with anyone, but I could tell that that's what had happened, that he had been being shot at and had probably shooting back. But what I saw was he was bringing his arm up, his gun hand, and he had a Glock, and I saw the Glock slide was locked back, indicating that he had just ran out. And he said, "I'm out," which would indicate to Casey, the way we would train would be now Casey would step in front of him and basically cover him while Jared reloads. So that's what I'm seeing happen is that arm's coming up. He says I'm out. And all of a sudden, again, this all happens so quick. I'm explaining it. It takes a few minutes, but we're talking fractions of a fraction of a second. All of a sudden, Casey and Jared just get shot up. What had happened is the suspect had heard them. I think he had heard them say, "I'm out." Now that bedroom was only less than 6 feet away. Again, this house is super small. So he's less than 6 feet away for that other hallway. So he comes charging down the hallway as Casey's shuffling past Jared. They're in that little small hallway that led into the other hallway, and they're just sitting ducks. And he's able to just run past him within, 18 inches, 2 feet, and just shoots him. Casey, who was starting to shuffle in front of Jared, he gets shot in the stomach below his vest, kind of bends him over a little. He gets shot directly center mass in his chest, which luckily he had his vest on and that stopped that. And then he gets shot a third time directly in the forehead. And he turns and falls and lands in the fetal position in kind of the front room. Jared gets shot multiple times. I'm not sure exactly where at this point, and I'll tell you where Jared was shot here in a second, but he falls and lands on his back, kind of more in the kitchen area. Now the kitchen's lit up, but the rest of the house is dark. And I have no idea where the suspect is. I just know he just dropped two of my guys. So I'm now turning the corner and I'm charging into the kitchen. And at this point for me, the entire world slows down. Like everything turns into slow motion. And it feels like you're running in mud. Like everything is slow and exaggerated. And all of a sudden, I no longer hear the sound of a gunshot, but the kitchen becomes a total war zone. And rather than hear the gunshot, I hear the actual bullet whiz past. I hear, and it's just tons of them. He's just lighting up the kitchen, and it's just, I feel him like, flying past. And then I can hear him hitting things in the kitchen, the stove, the fridge, the cabinets, whatever, ricocheting off. So you hear, and then, and everything's moving in slow motion. I don't know where the suspect is. And, and the frustrating thing about being shot at, especially in a very tight quarters like that, where he's just unloading on you, as stupid as it sounds, is you don't know where to stand. Do you stand? You can't see the bullets. So do you stand here? Do you stand here? Do you matrix the bullet? And the only thing that I could think was just keep moving forward. I got to get in here. I got to get my guys. I'm shooting. Honestly, it's just suppressive fire. I'm just trying to keep him at bay so I can get in to get my guys because I don't know where they're at. And I'm moving through the kitchen. And like I say, everything is slowed down, and I don't hear the gunshots. I just hear that whiz of the bullet. To describe it, it's like if you've ever rode a motorcycle and you're going down the interstate and you're really hauling ass and a bug or something flies past you and you feel this like whiz. That's what it feels like. And I remember there was this bag of cat food sitting in his kitchen on the stove. And as I'm running out of the corner of my eyes, I see this bag of cat food like jostle a little bit. And the bag was Friskies. And a couple of Friskies pop out of the top of the cat food bag. And again, everything is slowing down and you're like hyper-sensibilized where you just see everything. And I remember thinking, oh shit, he just shot his cat food. Like weird, in this moment. And anytime I go to Walmart and see that brand of cat food, I always think of that. But so I'm moving through the kitchen. Well, unbeknownst to me, there was a uniformed officer named Mike Runkles with the Ogden Police Department. Mike was about a block away, and he had just finished up a parolee check. He was checking on a parolee. Mike was part of a unit called the Crime Reduction Unit for Ogden City. They were strictly a proactive street crimes unit. They didn't handle calls or anything like that. They just went out. Their job was like zero tolerance to go and kind of stir the pot on crime. He was just finishing it up when the guys that had exited the home and were setting up a perimeter had called out shots fired and that an officer had been hit. So Mike jumped in his car and pulled up. He was only, a few moments away. Mike says as he pulls up is when I was handing Grogan off to Zaccardi at the end of the driveway. Of course, I didn't see him. And I turn, and that's when I start up the driveway and the shots start firing. Well, Mike jumps out of his car. He has a personal shotgun that he carried, that Ogden City let him carry. They didn't assign shotguns, but he had one. He grabs that shotgun and he starts running up the driveway as well. He said I was about 10 to 15 feet in front of him. And then Jason Vanderwerf, who had been on perimeter, sees all this happening. So he breaks off perimeter and is following Mike Runkles. He's right on Mike's hip, following him in. Mike says as he gets to the carport door and looks in is when I was at the top of the stairs slicing the pie to make my way into the kitchen. So he knows it's upstairs. So he starts to follow me. And as I turn and disappear around the corner of the kitchen, and as I'm moving through the kitchen, he's now made his way to the top of the stairs, and he does the same thing. He's slicing the pie with his shotgun at the top of the stairs. Well, as soon as he peeks around the corner with that shotgun, that's the exact moment when all those shots are coming at me. And as Mike peeks around the corner, he immediately takes a shot directly in the face, shoots him in the jaw, and it stops right at the base of his skull near his brainstem. And then a second shot hits him in the arm and shatters his elbow. So he drops to the ground, and Jason Vanderwerf, who was right with him, he gets shot in the hip, and he drops down as well. Well, Vanderwerf kind of rolls down the stairs a little bit, and Mike, again, an amazing thing. I mean, the guy shot right through the front of his face, bullets lodged at the base of his skull. His elbow is completely shattered. He obviously can't fight anymore, but he's also, another just an amazing guy. He's not going to lay there and be a victim. So with his one good arm, he starts to drag himself down the stairs through the carport and is dragging himself through the carport because he's like, at least I'm going to get away. I'm not going to just lay here and be a victim. And as Vanderwerf is getting himself up, he sees Mike crawling away, and he rushes over and grabs him and helps to drag him. So again, all this happens behind me. And I had no idea that any of this had even happened. I didn't know Mike was even there, and let alone had been shot. I'm still working my way through the kitchen. I remember I jumped over Francom and was going to Casey, who was further in the house. And as I get to Casey, he's laying in the fetal position, and he's completely unconscious. I actually thought he was dead. And I saw this thing sticking out of the front of his skull. And I thought it was a piece of wood. I thought maybe like a round had hit like a 2x4 or something and had put a piece of wood in his skull. But it actually turned out that was his skull. When he had gotten shot in the forehead, it had fractured, and about a 1.5 to 2 inch chunk was just sticking straight out of his skull. Obviously unconscious. He's pool of blood. I reached down to grab him. And well, as soon as I reach down is about when I run out. And rather than reload or anything, I remember I just tucked my gun in my waistband. I can't tell you why I did that. I mean, I could have put it in my holster that I had on, but for some reason I put it in my waistband. And I reached down and I'm just getting ready to grab Casey. And I feel what feels like someone come up to the side of me on my right side and just bam, just hit me with what feels like a baseball bat. That's not what it was. That was the first shot that got me. So that was the first one.
Where did it hit you?
In the hip. And so it goes through the front of my hip and then lodges up in the small of my back and doesn't exit. It stops there. And, it's funny. Everyone always asks, and I now go around the country and teach at different conferences and things. And everyone always asks, they're like, what does it feel like to get shot? And the reality is it fucking hurts. That's what it feels like. But the truth is that's actually a good thing. And somewhere along the line, I can't give credit to who it was. I wish I could, but somewhere along the line, I had learned that if you get shot and you feel it and it's very, very painful, that's actually a really good thing. Because if you're cognitive enough to understand that you just got shot, and you're conscious and able to understand that you're in a lot of pain and, oh man, I just got shot, you're still good to go and you're still able to keep fighting. Like, the shot that gets you will be the one that you just never see coming and hits you and lights out, whatever. There's nothing you can do about that. But if you're in pain, that just means you can buckle down and fight more. And that's exactly what happened. Like, I heard that was in my mind. I was like, oh, that hurts a lot. I'm good to go. Keep going. And simultaneously, because it was a double tap, but for me, they were two separate incidents, but I got shot a second time in the hip. But that same process, that same thoughts of, okay, that hurts, you're fine, keep going, went through my mind. I was able to reach down and grab Casey, and I start to drag him out of the home. I drag him through the kitchen, get over to the stairwell, and I'm dragging him down the stairwell, and Derek Draper's now coming through the door. And I was able to hand Casey off to Draper, who starts to drag him down the driveway. Now, at this point, Jared's still in the house. He's down, and I know I got to go back in and get him. I know I kind of felt like I had been lucky to get out the way that I had, but I knew I had to go back again and get him. So this time there was no thought. It wasn't like a plan. I'm not going to slice the pie. Like, I just was like, I'm just going to run as fast as I can and get in there and get him and get out. There was no suppressive fire, nothing like that. It was just get in and get out. So I hand Casey off. I turn. I start running up the stairs, get into the kitchen. Same thing happens. As soon as I get into the kitchen, he's just throwing rounds into the kitchen, just spraying and praying, essentially. But they're coming everywhere. And it's such a small area. I can still feel them. I don't hear the gunshots. I can hear the whistling of the bullets. I can hear them ricocheting. And everything, again, is totally moving in slow motion. And I'm just moving through the kitchen. It feels like you're running in quicksand. And I get to Jared, and I start to reach down to grab him. And all of a sudden, I feel, bam! I feel myself get shot a third time. And this one hit me in the left bicep. This one hurt, but not nearly as bad as the other ones. I mean, in fairness, this one just hit the bicep muscle, and it just put a hole straight through it. I remember like actually looking at it in the hospital, and it was just this hole. And I remember thinking like, I could probably run a pencil through that. It's just this hole through my bicep. It hurt, but it wasn't that bad. I start to reach down. I just about have a hold of Jared, and wham, I get hit a fourth time. This one hits me on the left side in the ribs. And I can't tell you why I'm here, because this one makes no sense to me. But it hits the rib. It actually hits a bone. And rather than penetrate and go into my chest cavity, it hits, and the bullet travels with the rib and exits out the back. Doesn't actually penetrate. Like, it ricochets off the rib, kind of. And what it does is it blows off this chunk of meat that's like, 3 by 4 inches chunk of meat. And I jokingly refer to, he blew a ribeye steak off the side of me. And that one hurt. I mean, again, the same thought process, both those shots, okay, it hurt. You're fine. Keep going. You can still fight. That one hurt real bad. Up to that point, that one was the worst so far. It knocked the wind out of me. Now, a little bit ago when I was talking about us getting ready for this, and I talked about my vest Velcro ripped off, certainly would have been nice had I been wearing what I should have been wearing. And so, because that would have prevented that. But I was able to reach down. I was able to grab Jared under his armpits, and I start to drag him. Now, kind of going back, once they started to kind of investigate it, they learned that the suspect was hiding just right around the corner in the hallway. So he was about 3 feet from me during these shots. But as I start to drag Jared, he realizes I'm not shooting back or anything. And for the first time, he actually steps out into the open. He steps into the kitchen, and I see him. And this is the first time I actually see him. He takes direct aim at me, and I know that this is it. Like, we're 2 feet, 3 feet at the most. My head feels like the size of a giant pumpkin sitting up there, and I'm just like, he's got me. Like, there's nothing I can do. And the only thing I could think to do was I flinched and I kind of fell backwards. Well, I had dragged Jared enough through the kitchen that I had gotten to that stairwell. So when I fell backwards, I actually fell through the doorway into the stairwell. So as he was taking aim at me, he didn't get a shot off, and I disappeared in that stairwell. And I land on my back. My shoulders land on the landing. My back and legs are going up the stairs. And Jared lands on top of me, and he's looking straight up. So we're both facing up. And the suspect does essentially what he's been doing the whole time. He puts his hand around the corner of the stairwell, and he just starts spraying that stairwell. Just boom, 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 boom. And again, I don't hear the gunshots. I just hear the whiz of the bullets. And two things kind of saved my life at this point. The first is, because it's a downward angle, when he puts his hand around the corner, I don't think he takes into account that he needs to aim a little bit down. So a lot of the first shots went over the top of me, and they either hit the wall right above me, or they went out the door and they were found out in the carport of the driveway. And then the second thing that saves me is Jared Francom. Jared's laying on top of me, and it turns out Jared was shot 7 times, and 2 of the shots were fatal. I was able to learn this watching the preliminary hearing, but 2 of the shots were fatal, and one of them they were talking about was at a downward angle, and they were really harping on that just to show that Jared wasn't a threat anymore, that essentially he was executed. Well, having been in the house and knowing where all the shots and the way they were flying, the only way that Jared would have been shot at that angle would have been when he was laying on top of me in the stairwell. So without a doubt, I know that Jared took a round that was coming for me, and I'm here because of Jared. And about that same, so he fires, a whole magazine, probably 12 rounds at us in that stairwell, and then I hear this loud click. And I'm able to see that the slide on his semi-automatic handgun is locked back. And all of a sudden, the hand disappears around the corner. Jared's laying on top of me, and I'm able to push Jared, and I'm pushing him out the door into the carport. And as I'm doing that, Jared and I lock eyes with each other. And he says to me, "Hey, Sarge, I can't feel my legs." And I thought, well, that's bad, but at least he's conscious. And I say, "You'll be okay. You'll be okay." And I push him out the door. And as I start to kind of sit up, I turn, and laying right there on the stairwell is a shotgun. And I have no idea where this shotgun came from. Obviously, it was Mike Runkle's shotgun. And whenever I tell this story, I always make a couple of jokes. I'm like, for me, I didn't know. I didn't know if, like, you're in this video game and all of a sudden they're like, "You've leveled up to weapon number 2, because all of a sudden here it is. Or maybe God's up there and he's like, "Man, you sure could use some help. Boom, here's a shotgun. See what you can do with that." But for me, all of a sudden there's a shotgun there, and I'm going to use it. And I recognized something about this that's different from other shootings. That was the aggressiveness of the suspect. A lot of shootings, I think the suspect does it and he's trying to get away. He's at a traffic stop or whatever. He shoots and drives away, or he's in an alley and runs away. That wasn't this case. I mean, he was hunting us. He had laid an ambush, and then he was advancing on us. And I knew that if I simply went out into the carport to grab Jared, he was just going to follow us out into the carport and continue to mow us down. So for me, this was kind of the line in the sand. I knew all my guys were out of the house. I knew everyone, so there was no one else in the house but the suspect. And that was it. I was pissed, and I was going to try to do my part to end this. So I picked that shotgun up with the full intent of, I'm going to bring the fight back to him. And as I'm starting to stand up, I don't have the shotgun all the way up. I'm just bringing it up. It's about hip level. And the suspect steps around the corner. And he was not expecting to see that guy there with a shotgun at all. I think he was doing what his plan was, is he would follow us, down and just do what I said. He was going to mow us down in the carport. So all of a sudden, I'm bringing the shotgun up. We're a foot to 18 inches away from each other, and I just know I have him. And I pull the trigger on the shotgun. It's not my shotgun. I wasn't familiar with it, and it doesn't go off because the safety was on. And at that exact same moment, the suspect lets out this scream like, ah, and he jumps back around the corner. But as he does that, he fires one shot. And that shot, just my luck, boom, goes and hits me right dead center in my right arm. And what it does is it shatters the bone, compound fractures the bone out the back of my arm. And the force of it flips my arm up to where it was actually laying up across my shoulders. I didn't know that. I just remember feeling it, and I talked about the other ones and how they hurt. Well, this one really rung my bell. And as I turn and look, I don't see my arm over there anymore because it's folded up behind me. And my first thought was, oh, that son of a bitch just shot my arm clean off. And I remember thinking, well, I need it. And I had this moment where I looked at the ground expecting to see like my arm laying on the ground. I don't know. I guess I was going to pick it up and walk outside with it. And then about just as fast as I have that thought, everything comes rushing back to me. And I realize, you're still in a shootout. You can't, don't be looking for your arm. So I step out into the carport. Obviously I had dropped the shotgun. I shot through both arms, but luckily that one in the left arm, it wasn't as serious. And I'm able to grab Jared, and I start dragging him down the driveway. As we're moving down the driveway, all of a sudden I hear that same familiar sound that I was hearing in the kitchen, that whoo, whoo, whoo. And I realized that I was being shot at again. The suspect had moved to the front porch and was shooting at me. He's about 15 feet from me at this point, and he's shooting as I'm trying to drag Jared down the driveway. And as I get to the end of the driveway, some more training kicks in, and I can give credit to the person. His name's Eric Jones. When I was a baby patrol cop, he was our firearms instructor at the sheriff's office. And I remember we had a range day, and we were training, and we were talking about different scenarios with shootings. And he's like, hey, if you're ever in a shooting, any cover is better than none, even if it's as simple as the gutter. If it offers you a little bit of protection, use it. And those words popped in my head, and I'm down at the end of the driveway where the gutter was, and I was able to lay Jared in the gutter, and I laid down next to him. And then there was a lull in the shooting. I didn't know it at the time, but patrol guys were starting to arrive, and they're now shooting back at him, which forced him back in the house. But all of a sudden I turn and I see a patrol car parked near the neighbors, in front of the neighbors. It was Mike Runkle's patrol car, who had been shot in the face. And again, I had no idea Mike had even been shot. I didn't learn about it until the following morning. But it's the same thing. Training kicks in from Eric Jones, the firearms sergeant. And he was like, if you're ever in a shootout and there's a car there, the safest spot on the car is the front end, because you got the engine block and the wheel axles and everything that will provide you protection. So I saw that car, I hear that training. So I moved myself over to that car, and I sit down next to it. And at this point, I remember I can't breathe, especially that one knocked the wind out of me. I'm losing a lot of blood. And I remember thinking, I just need to sit here for a second and collect myself. And then I'll start to help organize the perimeter and stuff. And one of the guys on my team from the sheriff's office, his name's Matt Jensen. We called him Shorty, but he comes running up to me and he kneels down next to me. And Shorty's this guy that was always known for saying just the dumbest things at the dumbest times. And I remember he kneels down next to me and we're at the car and he said, "Sarge, what are you doing? Are you taking a break?" And I wasn't witty or anything at the time because I would have been like, yeah, I'm totally taking a break. Like I get a coffee break every 4 hours and it's right now. And I'm going to take coffee. And when I'm done, then we'll start the shoot. I'm like, "No, you dumbass." I'm like, "I've been shot." And he looks at me and he's like, "Holy shit, Sarge, you've been shot. You're bleeding everywhere." I'm like, "I know." And he's like, "We got to get you to the hospital." So he grabs me, opens the back of the patrol car, pushes me in across the back. Him and a couple of the guys run over and grab Casey and bring him over and set Casey in on top of me. And then they go and grab Jared from the gutter and they're trying to push him in the front of the car. And they can't get him in because has that computer system over the passenger seat. And Jared being a big guy, they couldn't get him in. So ultimately they had to drag him a couple of blocks down the road. The ambulances wouldn't come up any closer because it was still an active shootout. But then Derek Draper jumped in the patrol car and drove me and Casey to the hospital.
I got to tell you, I'm so amped up right now. If you can see under this table, both legs are going 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, it is a crazy deal.
Well, and just like you say, the detail you remember stuff. So let's talk about the aftermath because you're now headed to the hospital. You've got this ends up in a standoff.
Briefly, the suspect, what he ends up doing is when the patrol guys arrived, they start shooting at him. One guy in particular, John Hill from the Ogden Police Department, has a rifle. He starts shooting at him with the rifle, actually clips him. Suspect rushes back through the house and he implements what I refer to as the escape plan. He had a large type buck knife, sitting on his windowsill in his bedroom, and he cuts the screen. And then he had pre-made this rope out of it's almost like those when you escape in the 1930s prison escape movies where they got a sheet and they tie knots in it to shimmy down. He had made one of those. And he tosses it out the window and he starts to shimmy down. Well, the shootout lasted so long. Ultimately, from start to finish, it was 13 minutes long, but it wasn't going as quick as he had planned. And so by the time he starts to get out the back window, there was some patrol guys that were starting to surround the back of the home. He takes a couple of shots at them and then dives into a metal yard shed, like you would use to store lawnmowers or whatever. And he ends up having a malfunction. And he wasn't able to work his way through that malfunction. So he had tossed the gun out and then ultimately called out that he was surrendering and they took him into custody.
So, yeah.
What fantastic restraint those police officers had to show to not take him out right there.
Yeah, exactly. And it kind of shows the difference of what cops are. I mean, they could have easily, no one would have ever have said anything. They never would have been in trouble. It would have been completely justified. But, morally, it probably would have been wrong because he was surrendering. So they didn't do it. I mean, just kudos to them.
It's what separates us from them.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you want to know something that's going to really make you pissed, Steve, I've been pulling up some of the things the family of the piece of shit said.
I saw some of them. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Like they called you guys a gang of thugs, said that you had no right to be there. Let's see. They also said that he was being made a scapegoat for violent mistakes and procedures of the police. He thought his home was being invaded and said his military training just kicked in. You've got people dressed as police, announcing they're police, armed with a search warrant. You knock and announce and you wait. He thinks he's being invaded, but yet he's got an ambush plan. He's got an escape plan set up. So, and the family, this is going to kill you, Steve. After the illegal assault on his home by a gang of thugs and his inhumane treatment at the Weber County Correctional Institute, along with the recent loss of an unfair and unjust ruling by the court, he gave up hope of ever getting justice in his case.
Yeah,
And who spoke that? His family?
Family, I got a response to the family. Fuck you.
Yep.
yeah, it's interesting. Um, Initially, the day after, so January 5th, a bunch of news crews went to his family's home, his parents, and they talked to him. And I watched it. I was in the hospital. I watched it. And the dad's like, hey, we don't have any contact with him. We're estranged from him. He's gone off the deep end. Uh, they basically were distancing himself from him. But as I think money and
Lawyers.
lawyers and everything started, the narrative changed, and they really, the other thing that really pissed me off was they would call him a prisoner of war because of the war on drugs. So they would march around flying the POW flag, and he's a prisoner of war, which was very insulting to me, to actual prisoners of war and guys that have served this country and had that happen to him. I found that extremely insulting. So yeah, it became somewhat controversial because of his family and the way that they acted and the way that they treated us.
Well,
Yep.
let's not get too far. Let's rewind because Jared, like you said, fatally injured. He does survive for a while. When did you first learn about Jared?
So I make it to the hospital, and I'll backtrack just a little bit because I have a couple of funny stories that I always think kind of just shows how it goes from one moment to the next. So when I first get to the hospital, we pull up to the hospital, and Derek Draper was driving, and he jumps out and he goes running in, and he grabs a wheelchair, and he comes running out, and he grabs Casey and he puts him in the wheelchair, and he rushes him off into the hospital. And I'm in the back seat, and I'm laying there, and I'm thinking, any moment, Derek's going to come back and grab me. Well, he never does. And so eventually I realized I need to get myself into the hospital. So I kind of shimmy across the back seat, and I put my feet out on the ground, and I sit up. And as I sit up, my arm comes flying over, that one that I thought he shot off. And that was the first time right then that I realized I still had my arm, because it flopped over. So I was able to grab my right arm. I was like, oh, that's good. And I start to walk into the hospital, to the emergency room doors. And the first little desk right there was a security guard. And he's just staring at me with these big eyes. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't get up. He doesn't help. He's just staring at me. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're not going to help me, then I'll just keep walking. And I walk in, and then there's these two nurses at like the check-in station, and they're just staring at me. No one says anything. And over off to my right is the waiting room, and everyone's dead silent, and it was full, and everyone's just staring at me. And I remember being like, thinking to myself, like, what is wrong with everyone? So I just keep walking, and I walk past everyone, and I go back into the actual emergency room, and I'm thinking I'm just going to find the first open bed, and I'm just going to lay down. And this little nurse finally comes up behind me, and she's like, I got you, and gets me in a wheelchair and wheels me in and lays me down. And I mean, I realize now what there was total panic. Like, these people in the hospitals, the security guard and the nurses and the people waiting, they're watching police officer after police officer after police officer be wheeled into the hospital, all shot up. Ultimately there was 6 of us that were shot, and I don't realize that. I'm just like, what's their problem? But that's what it was. Everyone was just like, man, what's going on in our city that we're losing that? So I'm in the hospital. They put out a code over the intercom that basically was like, every available doctor needs to come to the emergency room. Didn't matter if you were a cancer doctor or ear, nose, and throat or whatever. And they assigned teams to each injured officer. Obviously, Casey and Grogan and Runkles were very critical condition. They didn't know if they were going to make it or not. They were all rushed into surgery. I was put in. And I remember telling the doctors, I kept telling them that I had been shot 5 times. And they kept being like, no, you've only been shot 3 times. And I'm like, no, I haven't. I've been shot 5 times. And nobody would believe me. And it took about an hour, and they finally rolled me over and found some of the other. And they're like, holy hell, you've been shot 5 times. I'm like, I know. I've been telling you that.
The heck?
Yeah, exactly. So, and then another, kind of little funny story. So as I'm laying there, I've probably been in the hospital for about 10 minutes. I realize I probably ought to call my wife at the time and let her know. So I reach into my pocket with my left hand. I pull out my cell phone and I call home. It's probably about 9 o'clock at night. And my 10-year-old son, his name's Cordell, he answers the phone. And I was like, "Hey, buddy, what are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm just getting ready for bed." I said, "Oh, where's your mom?" He's like, "Oh, she's doing laundry or something." I said, "Okay, well, I need to talk to her." So I can hear him walking to go to mom. And all of a sudden, I feel this hand come over my shoulder and grab the phone. And I look up, and it's this male nurse. And he's starting to pull the phone out of my hand. And so we're having this little wrestling match over the phone. And I'm like, "What the hell? Give me the," and he's like, "Give me that phone." And I'm like, "What the hell?" Well, eventually he's able to pry my fingers off the phone and he tosses it and it lands over in the corner of the room. I can hear that phone over there vibrating like, I didn't have it on ring. And he's standing over there next to it. And I remember looking at him and I'm like, "Hand me that phone." And he just would go, "Mm-mm, mm-mm," and shake his head. And I, again, "Hand me that phone. Mm-mm, mm-mm." And I finally said, "If you don't hand me that phone, I will get out of this bed and I will whip your ass." So he reaches down, he grabs the phone and he tosses it to me. And I pick it up. "Hello." Of course, it's my wife at the time. And she's like, "What's going on?" And I'm like, "I don't know. This male nurse just attacked me." And she's like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Cordell said it sounds like you're in a fight." I'm like, "I am." She's like, "Where are you?" I'm like, "Well, duh, obviously I'm at the hospital. I just was attacked by a nurse." She's like, "Why'd the nurse attack you?" I was like, "I have no idea." She's like, "I'm so confused. Like, what's going on? Blah, blah, blah." And this is how she found out. And I said, "Oh, well, I got shot. I'm at the hospital. You need to come up here." She's like, "What? You got shot and a nurse attacked you?" I'm like, I know. You just need to come up here," which was a funny way to tell her. But the cool, good thing is she told me, she's like, "That was the best way because I thought you were fine." And she's like, "I just thought you maybe were grazed." And I remember when she finally came into the hospital room, she would start screaming at me, and she's like, "You're a liar! You're a liar! You're in bad shape."
Hey,
Well, what did
hold on, don't skip over that. What the fuck was the problem with the nurse?
Yeah, so that's so about a week later, I was having I'd had surgery. They were making me walk up and down the hall, to avoid blood clots and all that. The nurse comes running up to me, and it's the same nurse. And I'm like, "Dude, what's the problem?" And he's like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." He's like, "I thought you were the bad guy." Because they had cut all my clothes off when I first got there. So I wasn't wearing
Oh,
anything. So, I had a long goatee and stuff at the time. And he's like, "Oh, I just thought you were the bad guy." And I was like, "Okay, fair enough." And then I said, "Well, then why did you give me the phone?" And he said, "Well, I thought you were going to kick my ass." So,
So, but it's one of those things. So I get it. They're not used to the same thing. But my first thought, if you're the bad guy, you're going to be surrounded by a bunch of cops. You ain't going anywhere, Skippy.
100%, 100%. Like, it's never made sense to me, but for him, he'd never seen with it, never dealt it, and just
Okay, I've
yeah.
taken him off my hit list. That's decent enough explanation. All right.
did they bring the bad guy to the hospital?
They took him to a separate hospital. There's
Good
two
idea.
hospitals that are major hospitals in Weber County, and Jared actually took to the other hospital as well as the suspect.
When they were transporting you guys, did nobody radio in to the dispatch, call the hospital, have the trauma team on standby? We need stretchers, we need
They
wheelchairs.
did, yeah. The
Okay.
problem is, the incident was unfolding and it got so crazy so fast. They initially put it out, and they do that. They say, "Hey, we got an injured officer," blah blah blah. The problem is it's such a major incident. And just like me, like I talked about when I'm in the basement and I think maybe they're shooting a dog and different things are going on, so much is happening that as everyone's talking over the radio, you had guys that were like, "Okay, where's the downed officer?" Because initially it came out downed officer for Sean Grogan. And someone would call over the radio because they had Mike Runkles. "I have the downed officer. I'm getting him to the hospital." So there's this whole miscommunication on what's going on. I mean, you actually had a team of patrol guys, John Hill being one of them, that had organized where they were getting a patrol car and they were armoring it up with their old vests, bulletproof vests, basically to make a rescue vehicle. and they kept being like, "Where's the downed officer? We're coming in." And then you have someone say, "Well, I have the downed officer in my car," meaning Mike Runkles, and I'm getting him to the hospital. So such miscommunication going on. It's just a crazy incident.
When did you find out about Jared? How did you find out about Jared?
So I'm in the hospital. I got moved to critical care. They decided they were going to hold off on my surgery for a couple of hours because they were operating on the 3 guys with head wounds. So they didn't want to have everybody tied up, all the surgeons tied up if something bad happened. So they had put me in. They were monitoring me, and I had this other nurse in there, and it was another male nurse, but this guy was Paul Bunyan. I mean, he's like 6'6", like just this burly dude with this big burly beard. I'm pretty sure he had flannels underneath his scrubs and probably
Well,
a
you threatened to
hatchet.
kick the last guy's ass, so they put somebody in there to fight with you this
Yeah,
time.
that's exactly. They brought in the heavy hitter apparently, but this guy was so attentive. And I'm laying in my bed and both arms are bandaged up and I can't really move. And I end up getting this like major itch on my inner thigh on my left leg. And I remember trying to like reach down and grab it and to scratch. And I can't because my arms are all bandaged up and everything. And all of the sudden I feel this giant man hand come up underneath the sheet and start scratching my inner thigh. And this burly voice is like, "Did I get it?" And I'm laughing with him. I'm like, "No, it's a little further up and a little more in." Like I'm joking because I'm in high spirits. Because for me, I didn't know about Runkles getting shot. I hadn't heard yet. I didn't know about Vanderwerf getting shot. Casey was in the car with me, and when they put him in the car, he was conscious, or at least I thought he was because his eyes were open, where I initially thought he was dead. He didn't talk or anything. It turns out he wasn't conscious, but I thought he was. And I knew that Grogan had made it to the hospital. And then the last that I knew of Jared was when he told me he couldn't feel his legs, but I thought he was still conscious. So I was in fantastic spirits. I was joking with the nurses. I'm joking with this nurse, "Sir, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to stop scratching my inner thigh like that," just joking around. And about that same time, my lieutenant comes in. And I'm joking with him. I'm like, "Hey, LT, this guy here, he's full service. He's giving me all the special treatment. He's rubbing my inner thigh," and I'm laughing. And I can tell something's bad because my lieutenant's not laughing. He's just very solemn. And he says, "Nate, I need to tell you something. Jared died." And that's exactly what it felt like for me. Like the air just went out of the room. One minute I'm like joking with this nurse, and the next minute they just told me. What had happened is Jared was rushed into surgery and ended up dying on the surgeon's table shortly after midnight on January 5th. And so that's how I was told. And it was devastating. We were very, very close. All of us were. We loved Jared.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking.
And I'm reading some of these, pulled up some of these additional stories. He tried to say, the piece of shit tried to say that, hey, thought I was being robbed, didn't hear the officers announce their presence. His military training kicked in. But here's the other kicker too, Steve, though. Back in 2011, police say the piece of shit told a friend that if officers ever tried to stop his marijuana cultivation, he'd go out in a blaze of glory and shoot to kill.
Mm-hmm.
He did.
And you know what? I mean, he's such a law-abiding citizen. That's why he went ahead and had that knife up there next to the window, and he had that rope tied with knots in it, so he had an escape route. Because he's just a peaceful, loving person. What a bunch of bullshit!
And it's unfortunate, and we're seeing it all the time now. Anytime you see like some sort of a shooting, it turns high profile. It doesn't matter what the facts are. It doesn't matter what the reality is. The more controversial something is, the more clicks it's going to get, which is what is driving, media in today's society. And so they want it to be controversial, even when it's not. And they made this into it, which what they don't realize is that tears apart people's families. That tore apart my family. That completely consumed me for a year, reading all that bullshit, all those lies that I knew weren't true. And you can't say anything back because up until he started to talk a little bit about what happened, but we haven't haven't said exactly what happened to the suspect, but we were having to protect the case. We knew that they were trying to bait us, that the defense was trying to debate us to say that, if we would come out and defend some of these lies, that they would then turn around and be like, oh, they're tainting the jury pool, blah, 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 and hope to use that against us. So we had to stay silent. We couldn't rebut it.
You had to stay silent until May 14th, 2013.
Right. Yep. And that is because they tried all these different defenses. They claimed all kinds of shit. They claimed that it was all friendly fire, that we shot each other, all this stuff that wasn't true. I mean, everything was proven. Every bullet that was taken out of a cop was fired, including the one that I still have, was fired from a 9mm Beretta tied to his gun. I mean, so it was all, they just whittled down all the bullshit. So the last kind of stand that they took was they tried to claim that Jason Vanderwerf, the case agent, who was the affiant in the search warrant, they tried to claim that he intentionally lied in the search warrant, that he intentionally misled the judge. And they wanted to have a hearing to where they could present evidence to basically claim that Vanderwerf was a liar. And the judge wasn't just going to give them a hearing. He wanted a preliminary hearing. He's like, hey, I just want to hear what you think evidence-wise you have, and we'll determine if we're actually going to have the hearing. So they presented the little evidence. They had none. The judge said, no, we're absolutely not going to allow that Vanderwerf didn't lie. And he's like, furthermore, there's so much probable cause on this. I would have issued the search warrant. He wasn't the signing judge on the warrant. And he's like, I would have issued it. You're not allowed to use anything with the warrant as a defense. And the suspect knew. He knew exactly what they were seeking, the death penalty in this case. He knew he was guilty. He knew what he did. I mean, he's stepping over police radios that are talking because guys dropped him when they got shot. He's stepping over police gear. He's shooting out the front door and there's a marked police car in front of his house. Like, Mike Runkles, who was shot, was in uniform. So
well,
he
and
knew.
not only that, they've got some dash cam video, I think, of Runkles' vehicle when he pulls up. You've got the video of the scene, so you see the red and blue lights.
Yep.
But it's one of those things is we don't have. It's like it's such an absurd argument. It deserves no response to a bullshit thing like that. It's like if you can't determine that it's police, that's the end of this conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
what kind of idiot is he?
Well, I can tell you what kind of idiot he is. We're about to find out. What kind of idiot is he?
well, after he lost that hearing, he went back to jail and ended up hanging himself in his jail cell. Killed himself.
He's a room temperature idiot now, Murph.
That's the best kind. The best kind. That's exactly what he deserved.
I'm telling you what, folks may think that we're just have no compassion. I have compassion, but not for him. Not for what he did, not for how his family treated you guys. We have compassion for people who get shot that shouldn't, which are the cops. We have compassion for people who get caught up in the gunfire. And look, I even feel bad for people who they get to that point to where they feel like they have no choice but to fire at the cops. It's suicide by cops. I actually have compassion for those folks because what a tortured life you must lead to get to that point to where the only way for you to end it is to make somebody kill you. You don't do it yourself.
But here's the guy who prepared for you guys, was waiting on you.
This was an ambush. This was a prepared assault location. It was an ambush.
So it turned out he was home each of those times we went and tried to do the knock and talk. Those 5 times we went to his house to try to do a knock and talk. It turns out he worked graveyards, and so he was home. So he knew that we were going to come back eventually with a warrant. And like Morgan said, when he told a friend, it was actually the girlfriend. He said, if the cops ever come and try to take my plants, I'm going to kill them all. And he even told her, I'll escape out the back if I can, which is exactly what he did. She went to court and testified to that in the prelim, and she got raked over the coals by the defense, and to her credit, she stuck by it. She's like, I didn't believe him. So I didn't tell them because I didn't believe him. I just thought he was, talking.
Just bragging, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so did this result in a lawsuit?
No, there was no lawsuits. Some of the guys on my team and myself, we molded over on whether we should sue, which would kind of was unprecedented. It doesn't ever happen. A lot of times cops, They just take it and they just assume, oh, it's part of the job.
But even if you sued, who and what are you going to sue? The guy's probably got no assets, no nothing.
Exactly, and that's what it was. He had no assets. He had nothing. He was over his head in his house, so there was nothing there, and so we didn't. His family talked a little bit about it, but obviously the facts aren't on their side, so they didn't end up suing either.
Well, that's the old statement. When the law's against you, argue the facts. When the facts are against you, argue the law. And when the law and the facts are against you, then attack the defendants, or attack the plaintiffs, or attack. And that's
Make
they
sure
had
that
nothing on their side.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
So let's talk about you. How's the recovery been? Because well, first of all, Murph, before we get into the recovery, let's talk about you were honored twice as the National Law Enforcement Officer Memorial's Officer of the Month. Then you also received the State and Local Law Enforcement Congressional Badge of Bravery for what you did.
Yeah, that comes from the United States Congress. I also received the Medal of Valor, which is the highest award for valor in the country, and that comes from the office of the president.
You are our second Medal of Valor winner on here. We had Mike Neal on here, the Arkansas Fish and Game Warden who took out the sovereign citizens.
Yeah,
who also took out Vice President Biden.
Tell you, nut check the former vice president, current press. We have the video of it too. People think we're joking. We found the video of it, and you can see the look where Mike looks and he says, "Oops, just hit his nuts."
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And that's got nothing to do with politics. It's just funny.
Yeah, it totally is funny. Absolutely is funny. So yeah. I've been honored with a ton of different recognition, which is great. But I work with a lot of real heroes. That's the way I look at it. Jared Francom was a real hero.
And I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to say you would trade every one of those awards back in to have your buddy back with you in alive again.
100%.
Absolutely.
Yep. So, and some of the guys there that night, Mike Runkles and Sean Grogan and Casey Burrell and Derek Draper and those guys, the stuff that they did, that those guys are heroes. I just got lucky because he's a bad shot.
Lucky. You got 5 freaking bullets in it, brother. That's not luck. Well, that's the grace of God.
He was good enough. Yeah. And just one of those things, like we tell other folks, we just had this discussion yesterday with another guest that's coming up. It just wasn't your day to die, brother.
That's exactly it. Yep. That's what I believe. It wasn't my day, because there's no reason that one that hit me in the ribs shouldn't have killed me, but for whatever reason it didn't.
And that when you said that, it reminded me as a rookie police officer, Selena, I got sent to a shooting. And I'm the first officer on the scene, but I'm staying outside. I learned my lesson. I didn't go rushing in, Nate. I stayed outside and waited for backup. But out on the front lawn is the dude that got shot. So I'm covering him. There's another guy that comes out. I put him on the ground. Backup gets there. And so the one guy out there laying, he's dead now. I can say his name is a guy named Stevie Thomas. But we go up there and he's definitely got a bullet wound, in his chest. And so EMS shows up, and I'd gone through, I was actually just finishing up my EMT training. And the EMTs knew me because I'd been riding with them, doing my clinicals and stuff like that. So they go up there and they bring out their defibrillator and stuff, which has the ability to put leads on there and see a heartbeat. So they put it on there. They put the leads on there. They hooked it up. They said, "Oh, we got a flatline. Start CPR." I started CPR. The dude was still alive. They had it set to paddles instead of leads, so it showed a flatline. So I'm doing CPR on a live guy, which let me tell you, that's how you quickly find out he's alive. And what happened with
saved him.
Yeah, his girlfriend, they got into a domestic. Girlfriend had shot him with the .25 auto. It hit his rib, and same thing. Went around underneath the skin of his back and lodged on the opposite side. So all the doctor did was make a little 1-inch incision, and out pops the bullet. So we're in court, and I remember the county attorney's name to this day, Rex Lorson. We're in front of a judge, and they were making motions and stuff because Stevie gets up there and, of course, "Oh, no, it was an accident. I shot myself. It wasn't her," because we were going to charge her. And he, of course, kind of hard to do it when the victim doesn't want to cooperate. And he says, "Are there any other motions the court should hear?" And the county attorney raises his hand and says, "Yes, Your Honor, I'd make a motion. We'd like to get her a bigger weapon next time." That went over like a turd in a punch bowl.
Oh, my goodness. Well, so Morgan had asked you about your recovery. So What's the lifelong lasting effects of this?
Yeah. So when I initially get in there, it's kind of crazy. I never thought I was going to die. Like to me, they were all just, just wounds. They put this thing in my neck when I first got there. They put this line in my neck and they capped it. And it was about a week later they came in. I had had a couple of surgeries and they came in and they pulled it out. And I remember asking the doctor, I was like, what's up with that? And he says, oh, we have this line into your heart. We were prepared for you to if you died or your heart stopped, we were going to pump you full of steroids, get your heart going again. And I remember being like, well, I never thought I was going to die. And he's like, well, that's probably why you didn't. It's just that I think you can talk yourself into living, you talk yourself into dying. For me, I just kind of figured, I would, had a little bit of a long road of recovery, which I did. I went into surgery. They removed the bullet from my back. That was the only one. The rest of them were through and through. I went to work about 6 months later. I went back working narcotics again. They had to rebuild my arm, my right arm. That was metal. They put metal in there for the bone and everything. The left arm, that hole, it just kind of filled in. And then the big one on the left rib cage there, all you can do is just kind of mash it back together and let it heal, and then mash it back together and let it heal. And that took about a year. But with this right arm, and my legs, a lot of nerve damage that still haunts me to this day, but it is what it is. But the worst one was that right arm. And I got back to work about 6 months, and I was back to work for about 2 weeks, and I got really sick. I kept getting sick, even when I was in the hospital initially for about 2 weeks, got out, had to go back. I went septic. My arm was infected. They operated on it, got out. This kind of went on for a few months. I finally got to where I thought I was okay, went back to work. And about 2 weeks later, I went septic again, had to go back into the hospital, was in there for a while, got out, went back to work, went septic again. It turned out that the metal that they had rebuilt my arm with had staph on it. So they would treat me and I would get better, and they'd put all these crazy antibiotics on me, and I'd get better. But because it was on the metal, as soon as I was off of them, it would grow again and infect me again. So it took me about a year and a half to fully recover from the arm. They had to redo the metal, take it out, redo it. But once they did, then I've been pretty good. The weird thing is I lost a lot of my hearing in my left ear. And they say that, yeah, exactly. Because I have these headphones on and I can I can focus on you guys. I can hear real well. But
see, only cops can dick with other cops like that. Even if you've been shot, it's like, you don't, pal. I'm sorry, man.
Hey,
cut you no slack. Yeah,
you go fire away. I don't care. It doesn't bug me. But yeah, I lost 80% in my left ear and 60% of hearing in my right ear.
Wow. From what? From all the gunshots?
Yeah, they said that it wasn't.
Was it the proximity of the shots going off?
Exactly. It was so close that it ended up blowing out my eardrums. Most of those shots, it turns out, when we go back and look at the whole thing, he was usually between 2 to 3 feet from me. I just couldn't see him because of the way he was hiding in the dark and stuff.
I've lost the upper hearing ranges in my hearing, but not so much from firearms, but more from the helicopters and stuff.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that would do it too. I mean, it does come in handy, and we can get into this too. I'm happy to talk about this because that whole incident ended up costing me my marriage. But I'm newly remarried, and it does come in handy with my new wife because if she says something I don't want to hear, then hey.
Oh, you were talking what?
Yeah, I'm legally deaf, and you can't pick on a handicapped person.
It's against the law. It's against the law.
That's what I tell her all the time. ADA, I am protected. ADA, can't say anything.
What about the other officers that were wounded?
Yeah.
Did everybody recuperate?
Everybody recuperated. Believe it or not, Casey Burrell took a long time, but he eventually came back. He went back into narcotics. He's still working narcotics to the day, and Casey's the one that had that chunk of the skull sticking out of the front. Mike Runkle's, the bullet is still in Mike Runkle's base of his skull. They can't take it out. They said if it's like literally less than a millimeter, if they bump it, hits his brainstem, he'll die. So they can't take it out. He went back. Eventually, he got transferred into narcotics, and he's been promoted up to he's a patrol lieutenant now for Ogden City. Sean Grogan went back. He recovered. They had to wire his jaw shut. He went back to the strike force. He was in the strike force for a ton of years, and now he's one of the Ogden City's homicide detectives. Jason Vanderwerf, who was shot in the hip, he worked for Roy City Police Department, and he ended up lateraling over to Ogden City, and he's been promoted. He's a lieutenant in the patrol division at Ogden as well. So yeah, everybody is doing fantastic, yeah. Yep.
And so we told our listeners at the beginning of this that we've had a lot of heroes on here who have been wounded in the line of duty, survived, and they come on with us and tell their story. But then there's also this is a step higher, or a step further, I guess, not higher, but further, in the fact that under fire, wounded, had the presence of mind to pull one victim out, a brother police officer, and then you went back in a second time and suffered all these additional wounds. God bless Jared and his family. Morgan, thank you for dedicating today's show to Jared's memory.
Well, let me tell you someone who didn't forget
guys.
Jared's memory. I'm going to read a little thing to you. So one of the things I support, in fact, if you go to Amazon, you can enroll what they call Smile, and you can make donations. So the one I donate to is the Officer Down Memorial page. I do their rides every year. So the most recent reflection on Jared's page was written January 4th, 2022 by somebody called Lieutenant Nate Hutchinson. 10 years ago today, still think about you every day. My mission is to continue to tell your story as I travel the country telling people about your sacrifice. We continue to laugh at the funny times we shared and the lovable, dumb comments you'd make. I know you are laughing each time with us. Valhalla, brother. So until Valhalla, we salute.
Yeah. I try to go on there. I probably go on once a year and post a memory to him.
Never forget.
Mm-hmm.
Never forget.
Dude, I'm sorry. It's like I got to stop because I'm not crying. You're crying. No, I'm not crying. You're crying.
Yeah. I know.
No,
everybody just give us a second here.
Yeah. So I got to. What an amazing story, but what an amazing thing for you. Let's close out with this. Just tell us what you're doing now. So, is your law enforcement career still active? Did it come to an end? What are you doing?
Yeah. So I went back. I did another 10 years. I just recently retired. And so now I do two things. The first thing that I do is I go around and teach. Very fortunate in having opportunities to go around, mostly narcotics or gangs conferences, but I have a whole presentation with videos and crime scene photos and everything, and I talk about the incident, hoping to kind of pay some of the lessons learned forward, and hopefully help brother and sister police officers, that if they're ever in a similar situation, that maybe something I say can help them. So I do that. I travel quite a bit doing that. I have a couple coming up. I'm teaching in for Tennessee Narcotics in Chattanooga in November, and then I'm teaching for a HIDA class in Hilton Head for a HIDA group out there in November as well. So I do that, and then the other thing that I got into was real estate. I got my real estate license and starting a second career, buying and selling homes.
Sweet.
Well, then the only thing I can ask you is, what have you sold today? I mean, because it don't matter what you did yesterday. What'd you do today?
Exactly. Yeah, haven't sold anything today, but the day's young, so maybe we'll still get one.
And you've been wasting your time with a couple of old farts on this podcast.
There you go. So. That's right.
I've loved every minute of it. It's been a blast.
Well, this has been an honor for us to have you on here. Thank you, brother. It's I think Will Stinnett in Oklahoma is the one that introduced us to you.
Yep.
So we got to give him a shout out. Just unbelievable, unfreaking believable. Just that warrior mindset's what kept you alive. And I love the fact that your initial training officer, his words are coming back. You feel that pain, you're still alive, you're still in the fight.
Yep.
Good words of wisdom.
And I think that I think that's a lesson. I mean, I try to tell people that because that's just not a cop lesson. That's a life lesson. I mean, in today's world, you never know but if you're, somewhere and something crazy happens, mass shootings, we see them occasionally. I think people can will themselves to live. I really do. And I try to tell that to anyone, like, just because you're shot, like, just get pissed.
Well, and let me tell you, they did the study on that. I think the FBI, some other folks did some research, and they looked at officers that had non-fatal wounds, but with all you look at the contemporaneous stuff in the accounts, they talked themselves into dying. Oh, it's bad. I'm going to die. I'm going to
Yep.
die. Dude,
Yep.
shut the fuck up. You're not going to die. Because
Exactly.
to your point, you can talk yourself into living, or you can talk yourself into dying.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, we're sure glad you talked yourself into living, because this would have been an awkward podcast without.
Yeah, it would have.
Just wouldn't have been the same.
What's that? I'm sorry.
It just the podcast wouldn't have been the same
Would have
about
been
you.
the same,
Oh,
man.
yeah.
So look, you hang on, don't go anywhere. We're dedicating this to Agent Jared Daniel Francom, the Ogden Police Department. End of watch Thursday, January 5th, 2012. We salute you. We salute him until Valhalla, brother. You guys stay there. Everybody else, stay tuned for the debrief. When you go to the dictionary and you look up the word stud, it says, see Nathan Hutchinson.
Hey, did we warn you? And think about what you just heard. And just think about, could you put yourself in Nate's shoes and go back in there not once, but twice to help out your partners? I hope you could. You know what? I think I could when I was younger. At this old age now, I don't know that I could.
Yeah.
But I mean, just think about it and then let us know. Let us know your thoughts on this. Come and join us on our fan page on Facebook, Game of Crime Fans. Get it to us through our website, or go on and rate us and give us your comments. We'd really like to hear what you think about Nate Hutchinson and his heroic actions.
Yeah, and Nate will tell you, were mistakes made that day? Yeah, but mistakes, even though you make mistakes, it doesn't mean that the other guy gets to kill cops.
Right.
And this guy was prepared. We refuse to use his name. He's just simply referred to as POS. And as you found out in the episode, he's a dead POS. He took the chicken shit way out. He hung himself in jail.
Mm-hmm.
Which is.
And here's the thing that gets me. Everybody says weed is a victimless crime. Well, was it a victimless crime that day?
Was not.
I mean, Nate said they were only going to give him a citation. That's all he was going to get.
At the most. And the other thing, too, they may have just dismantled it. I mean, quite frankly, it's like he said, they got bigger things to work on. They were doing cartel stuff, big investigations. This was a tip that had been hanging around for a few months, Murph. It's not like, oh, my God, it's a guy smoking weed. We got to go bust down his door and kick ass and take names. It was like, that was absolute low priority, and it didn't get worked on until over Christmas, when things had slowed down and they were catching up on their tips. So,
right.
But look, at the end of the day, though, too, it's like, you can't forget the people who suffered through this, all of his partners. Obviously, we dedicated the episode, so you guys listen to that. We'll tell you about the dedication. But at the end of the day, I got to tell you, man, it's just what these guys do. And again, we just want to make sure that we call out Jared Francom. Jared Francom was the agent, was the officer, was Nate's buddy, who was killed in the shootout. A couple other cops were injured. And in spite of all of this, in spite of, there's a definition, too, that talks about, they say, are you scared? Absolutely. But you still go out and do your job,
Yep.
Yeah, if you're in a situation like that and you're not scared, that's when you make stupid mistakes and you cowboy it and you John Wayne it. So this is dedicated to Jared Francom, member of the Weber County Narcotics Strike Task Force, died in the line of duty. And guys, if you just wonder what's it like, Nate will live with this not only because his partner died, but because of the injuries he suffered. He gets to live with this for the rest of his life. So we wish him well on this. He's got a new career. I believe it is with real estate, man. He is buying and selling homes.
Yep.
So if you need a home out there, look up Nate Hutchinson. Say, hey, Nate, I got a home. I need you.
I need a hero for a real estate agent. I apologize in the opening. I couldn't remember the officer that introduced us to Nate is Wayne Stinnett in Oklahoma. So, brother, thank you very much, Wayne, for the introduction. What a hell of an interview and what a hell of a hero.
Yeah, and that's, the other thing too is we get a lot of our guests now because of people listen to the podcast, they're in law enforcement, or they know somebody who is. They say, hey, this would be a great story. So if you've got stuff, gameofcrimespodcast@gmail.com, just drop us a note over there. But again, Jared Francom, this episode is dedicated in the honor of his memory and in the honor of all the guys who, and men and women around Murph too. The other thing too is when we're recording this, this is in October, the second week of October, 2022. Been a lot of cops die this last week. It has been a bad week for law enforcement.
Yeah, it's not getting any better out there. Politicians, how about y'all waking up, addressing the issues for us?
Yeah. All right. Well, let's bring her back now. So, hey guys, thanks again. Once again, thanks again for being on here. And what Murph said, we forgot to do it in the intro, so apologies. But our favorite Mafia Queen, Sandy Salvato, runs our Game of Crimes fan group. So just go Game of Crimes and look it up. Just answer a couple simple questions. If you got a heartbeat, and you're barely breathing, you can figure out a couple. Just even get close, and you'll be provided entry into the secret society that is called Game of Crimes Fan. So,
and
guys,
whatever you do, don't tick off Sandy.
No, you don't. And if she offers you food, eat it.
We got to get up there. I want to try her cooking.
I know. Well, we're talking about doing a show. So that's the other thing too. We're talking about 2023, looking at, do we do at least a select few road shows, take some of these interviews on the road. And you don't know, maybe we'll do something.
You never know.
You
never know what's going to happen on Game of Crimes.
You never know what's going to happen, but I do know what's going to happen if you go to Apple and Spotify and hit those 5 stars. It's going to make more people find us and love us and like us and listen to us. And once you like us and love us and listen to us, you'll never go anywhere else again. So just go hit those 5 stars.
And if you're gullible enough to believe that, we've got a bridge.
I'll get a hold of Nathan and he'll sell you a house.
There you go.
All right. And also head on over to gameofcrimespodcast.com. Over at our website, we've got our merch, mailing list, things like that. Fun stuff. Hit us up on the social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, at Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. And just head on over to paypal.com too. Use our email, gameofcrimespodcast@gmail.com, if you want to just do a pause for the cause. But I leave you this with, Murph, right? We said, where do you got to be, where you got to be? And we are recording something. So where do you got to be if you want to hear the next installment of You Can't Make This Shit Up?
Come on over and join us on Patreon. Give us a shot over there. Just come on and listen to the different things and see. I know you're going to think it's worth it. I have to be careful what I say because Morgan will fuss at me if I say
I will.
wrong
If you
word.
use that C word, I will just come through the screen and I will choke you.
But give us a shot. There's a lot of stuff on there. Here we stay apolitical and we try to stay focused on the interview that we're with. We do have some side stories occasionally, but over there we get a little more personal. We relive a lot of war stories on the Patreon, but there's some cool stuff on there that you're not going to hear anywhere else. So just come over and try us out.
And some of the war stories we relive, we don't know if we actually did them, but at this age, man, we could have. So that's the only thing that counts. Yeah, it sounds like something I might have done.
Yeah, we both just had birthdays this month. So, hey, look at us. We made it another year.
Yeah.
That's right. Morgan and his sister is going to come on here shortly. Well, there's something you want to hear on the Patreon. Come over because we're going to have Morgan's sister on here with us shortly.
Sitting in the studio as we recorded. All right, guys. So, hey, let's bring this to a close. So we want to thank you guys once again for being supporters out there. Like I say, just go over to the website, tell one, share this podcast with folks. And remember, Murph and I are working on a new format. We plan on launching that in January, and we have some good stories coming up for that. So we're going to have a new format. It's going to be a little different, just kind of prepping you guys. It's going to be a little shorter. We're looking at the realities of what it takes to put on podcasts and get people out there. Now, the good thing is that we're not going to get away from telling our stories. Some of the stories may end up on Patreon, the longer versions of them, but we're going to do things to get move along, tell the story in just a little bit different fashion. But we still want to dive into it and do things. But we've got some stuff coming up with families of fentanyl. We're thinking about doing an entire month just dedicated to telling stories about the families who have died, have had family members die from poisonings, not overdoses, people. Poisonings.
Yep. Through our contacts with Morgan, through our contacts with Derek Maltz, who's.
How did you confuse me with Derek?
I was just thinking about you. I'm looking at you for one reason. He's got some connections with the Faces of Fentanyl group. We've got some personal friends that we've been on Capitol Hill with who've suffered losses in their families. Law enforcement officers all around the country sending recommendations for us about families who have suffered through these tragedies. So. It is going to be a little bit different in the fact that it's not going to be a police story, a police hero telling you about their story, but it's that important. It's that important not only to us, but to you and our nation, what's going on.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about a dangerous game, fentanyl is absolutely one of the most, if not the most dangerous game going on out there right now. Because name one other drug that kills over 100,000 people a year.
Right, right. We got to do something, and this is going to be our little contribution.
Yeah, we're going to change the narrative. You never use, unless it's a true overdose, you don't use the word overdose. It's a poisoning. It's a criminal act, and it ought to be investigated. But that being said, let's bring this to a close. So we want to thank you guys once again for playing the biggest, baddest, most fun and friendly, dangerous game of all, the Game of Crimes.